Appreciate it. It's January around 2014, right outside of Chicago, Illinois. There's a gentleman named Mike Say, and Mike's a small business owner, runs a local shop, shuts down 5 o'clock like he does pretty much every day, goes home to meet his wife, which he does every day. And this day is a little bit different. As he walks into the house, he doesn't see his wife, he hears her. And he hears her crying. He walks into the back room where she's sitting. He walks up to her and he asks her what's wrong, and she doesn't respond to him. She doesn't say anything. She just hands him this piece of junk mail. As he's looking at it, he's reading it over and he's like, I don't understand. This is just something from Office Max. And then he reads his name, Mike Say. And right below it, daughter killed in a car crash. And at that moment, at that point in time, in January of 2014, this Say family and this brand, Office Max, had a break in trust. This data wasn't wrong. It just never needed to be here. Most businesses today think about trust, but they don't necessarily connect the dots with how the data that they collect about their customers has a relationship to it. In this particular case, this story isn't a story that I should ever be able to tell you. But what happened almost a year earlier is that the Say's family did have this tragic accident happen in their family. And about a year earlier, in advance of a memoriam for their daughter, a friend of theirs in a state all the way over went to a store called All Things Remembered to purchase a digital photo frame. And in buying the digital photo frame, in that store, All Things Remembered, at that particular point in time, they were running a campaign with their store clerks to do something many of us care about as we build out the information we know about our customers and the information we know about our communities. They asked that person who was buying that photo frame, what's the life event that this is being purchased for? And they said what it was, and it was just what it said. Their daughter was killed in a car crash. That story should have ended there. We should have never been able to talk about this today. Well, All Things Remembered, for some of you that are my age, probably do remember it. It's not in business anymore. And at that time, they started to struggle financially. And as a business starts to struggle financially, they start to look at alternative ways that they can create revenue. And in this case, All Things Remembered said, we have a customer database. We can take our customer database and we can lease it and sell it, and we can generate more revenue that way. And they did what so many businesses do. They sold that data to a data broker, to a third party. And this story should have ended. We should have never been able to talk about it. The next thing that happened was Office Depot, not Office Max, but Office Depot, was running a campaign in Ohio, and they wanted to build more information in the customer database so that they could be more effective in the local mailers that they're sending out. So they went to this data broker, and they bought this data. And about 3 months later, Office Depot and Office Max merged. And what do you do when you merge as a business? You look for places where you can find synergies. You look for places where you can create more opportunities for the business to be more successful. And in this case, Office Depot and Office Max took a look at the two businesses that they were running, took a look at their customer databases, joined them together, and ran a campaign in Chicago to figure out how they could drive people into the local stores. The story is not a story that I should be able to tell to you. And unfortunately, the story is becoming more and more common. We hear about the importance of building trust in the relationships with our communities and with our customers, but we don't have a lot of practical tools in order to think about how we might operationalize that. We're going to spend the next 15 minutes talking about a few really important trends that you should all know about and be able to talk about in your organizations. And I'm going to share with you 4 very practical data practices that you can also take back to your organizations to start to talk about trust and think about how employing these practices can actually make sure you're doing the absolute best on behalf of your customers and on behalf of your community to make sure you're building and maintaining trust. My name is Jascha Kaykas-Wolff. I've been in the technology, marketing, and product world for the last 20 years at some very large companies and some very small startups. And throughout my career, there have really been 2 key threads that I've pulled on that have helped myself and the teams that I've worked with be successful. One of them is about recognizing that the processes we use inside of organizations aren't as efficient and as effective as they need to be. So throughout time, over the last 15 years, I've been introducing the idea of lean and agile, capital A agile, directly into marketing teams and business teams. And over the course of the last 4 years at my time at Mozilla, we've actually deployed agile in one of the largest kind of recognized marketing-specific disciplines in the world. About 120 people globally, across 10 different countries, all work in a lean model. It helps us be smarter about the way that we invest our people's energy and our time in the biggest business and community challenges that we want to address. The second thing that I've focused on throughout my entire career is investing in technology to help organizations be more effective and more efficient, to understand the impact that they have on their business. In fact, when I started to think about the way that technology could have a relationship into the marketing department, it was before the idea of marketing technology existed. Tomorrow, for those of you that are here, you'll see a speaker named Kobe Fuller. He's in a fireside chat in the afternoon. Kobe and I have been friends and worked together over the course of the last several years. And in 2016, Kobe and I went out and interviewed 2,000 different marketing technology companies to get a sense of how each one of those companies were positioning their products to help marketers and businesses better understand how they collect, organize, and take action on customer data. At the time, we thought that the growth in marketing technology was pretty fascinating. From the time that I had been thinking about investing in technology, Kobe had been thinking about investing in technology, we'd seen a massive growth, hyperbolic growth in companies. And what's been interesting for us, both as practitioners in the space and researchers in the space, is that this hasn't slowed down. In fact, just this last year, for those of you that follow Scott Brinker, he published his latest report. We see more than 7,000 companies that are creating technologies that collect customer data, organize it, and take action on it with you as a business. Well, why is this important? Because there's an underlying problem that has existed because we look at technology first. It's that we're really not focusing on the basics anymore, not in the business and not in marketing. We're creating products, we're creating things, we're dropping things out to our community, to our customers, and we're just kind of hoping that they work. And we're hoping that the technology that we buy in lives behind a promise that comes with the idea of big data, that when you collect it, you'll be able to find the magic growth equation that'll make your business work. There's a really big problem, and that's that promise, the promise of big data, is a farce. It's a little bit like having a Roomba for those of you that have one. I do. I believe that when I leave in the morning, it's going to pop out of its little cradle, and it's going to clean the house in the way that I expect it to, and what really happens is that it runs into a bunch of chairs, and it hits a table, and it gets stuck underneath my couch, and the battery dies. Like, that's what practically happens with my Roomba, and that is practically what has happened with marketing technology. We have an expectation that it's going to help solve a bunch of problems. The reality is we're not doing the research we need to do to understand our customers and our community well enough to be able to inform smart business decisions. We just hope that this magic growth equation is going to come along. Here's the thing, though. Like, we have seen massive growth in marketing technology from almost none to over 7,000 companies over the course of the last 6 years, and it really hasn't impacted many of us here. Like, we're not changing our business practices because of it. Something different has happened in just this last year to year and a half. The idea of privacy and security have left the discussions of the back rooms of IT departments and moved into popular culture. We read about it in the newspapers, we see it on TV, we understand tangibly how data has a relationship to each one of us individually, and we understand that businesses are actually thinking about how they collect information from us and put it into practice. What's interesting, though, is that most of us, even though we may all be very educated about the way that technology works, don't understand the risk profile that we're introducing to our customers and into our community. How many of you think you're investing in more than 2 or 3 different technologies to interact with data with your customers? Maybe a few, but not most. Trend number 1, and this is an important trend, we're introducing more risk than we understand to our customers and our community. Here's how, and here's how I know. A couple of years ago, a company named Ghostery, that's owned by Bertelsmann, which is a conglomerate in Germany, conducted a study. Ghostery is an expert in enterprise data protection. They went out to over 100 different senior marketers and business executives and companies, and they asked them one question. How many different technologies are you investing in that interact with your customer and your customer's data? And they said, just like many of you did here, I'm probably investing in a couple of different technologies, and that makes sense. Some analytics, maybe some optimization tools, maybe a CMS. Makes sense. Ghostery is unique because they have an ad blocker that's a consumer product as well, and it sits on tens of thousands of different browsers all over the world. So what they did that was important is that they went back to those 100 different websites of those 100 different companies that they had those interviews with, where their executives said, we're only introducing our customers to 2 or 3 different companies, 2 or 3 different types of data. And they found something pretty surprising. While most businesses, most executives believe they were introducing their customers' data to only 2 or 3 different companies, in fact, the risk profile was exponentially larger than any of them knew or understood. And we see this continuing to take place today. We think we're investing in a couple different kinds of technologies, but in fact, we're introducing a much larger risk profile to all of our customers and all of the people in our community that interact with the properties that we're building. Interesting. Cool. Risk profiles, they're increasing, seems kind of tangible, but maybe I don't really care. It hasn't really impacted my business. So what? Some of you may follow an organization called Edelman. They're a communications organization. They conduct a research report each year called the Trust Barometer. They've been doing this for over a decade. Over the last 3 years, we've actually seen a decline for the first time in the recorded history of this report in trust with businesses around the globe. But it hasn't been an exponential decline. It's been kind of a linear, slow decline. In this last year, in 2018 and 2019, what we've seen is probably one of the most dramatic shifts in consumer trust with businesses. And it's probably not terribly surprising to any of you sitting here that the trust in business is declining most rapidly in the US, and most rapidly with not the youngest population in the world, with the largest recorded group of people in history and a demographic, millennials. So here's a problem. Trend number one is that we're introducing a risk profile to our customers data that we don't even understand as a business. And problem two is that this sits right in front of, and in stark contrast to, a challenge that I think we all care about, and that's that people, consumers, are caring less and less about what we do because they trust what we say less and less. I like to think about it and talk about it this way. And this is kind of a turn of phrase that has worked really well for us as we've talked about the importance of businesses being more human. It's that part of the challenge that we all deal with as consumers, part of the challenge that we all deal with as community members, is the things we love to do, the technologies that we want to interact with, the products that we want to use, they just don't love us back. They don't treat us like people. And that can't be the case if we want to see any kind of a change or a correction in the trust that people have with what we do. If that's not interesting enough or important enough for you, we sit behind this one trend that we're exposing a risk profile to our customers that we probably don't understand. It's bigger than we would have expected. And the second is that trust is generally declining for businesses. This third trend is even more important because it's about the future. At Mozilla, we do research to understand how we as an organization, which is relatively unique in the context of technology organizations, can better position what we do to make sure that more people understand exactly the kinds of things that we build and why it's important. For those of you that don't know, we've been around for about 15 years. We're a not-for-profit organization first. We just happen to build a consumer product that hundreds of millions of people use every day. What's unique about us is that we don't have a corporate shareholder. We don't focus purely on profit. We focus on achieving our mission, which is to maintain an open, accessible internet. We do that not just with our employees, but with a community population of about 30,000 on top of the full-time employees at Mozilla. So as an organization, we have to find unique and different ways to bring our message out to the market because we can't compete with scale like Google. We can't compete with dollars like Microsoft. We can't compete with an ecosystem of hardware products like Apple. So it's important for us always to have a good view into what consumer trends are going to drive behaviors over the course of the next several years. And a few years back, we started to conduct some research to learn just that. What are the most important consumer trends that we need to be thinking about if we care about how people trust us as an organization? And what we found is fascinating. We went out to 8 different countries, an N of greater than several thousand, and we asked what behaviors are influencing your purchase decision? What behaviors are influencing purchase intent for you? And what came back universally is that there is a group of people around the world that are not docked to a specific demographic or psychographic, to a specific amount of money that's being made in rural areas, in cities, but a behavior that's starting to change that is best represented in a simple concept. We call this the conscious chooser concept. The idea behind the conscious chooser concept is that there is a group of people around the world who, when they have a decision between product A and product B, brand A and brand B, as long as those two products are equal, they serve the same utility, they'll choose product A or product B based on their own views of the alignment of their personal values to that organization. This conscious chooser concept is important, and it's very easy to understand when we think about the offline world. You choose to go shop at a store. You choose to go shop at a local store because you know that that local store is going to provide you with local produce. You'll do that before you go shop at a Kroger's or a Safeway. This conscious consumerism is driving more and more behaviors that are important for us to think about as brands, only if this is a big group of people. Well, trend number 3 that I can tell you is that it is in fact a big group of people. We followed that study with a sizing study, same general N, same general countries. And what we found is that this group of people, the conscious chooser, back a couple of years ago, made up about 20% of the population of the internet. So let's think about that size. The internet's somewhere between 3.2 and 3.6 billion people. So around 1 billion people right now are saying to all of us sitting in this room, if you present what you do and it is equal to your competitors, and you operate ethically, and you operate in a way that relates to my values, I'm going to choose you. That flies starkly against the trend that I just shared. Consumer trust is on the decline. It's on the decline quickly, but there's a big group of people who want to trust. They just need to understand that they can trust you. And the most tangible way to do that is to make sure they know that you're going to take care of their personal data, especially in the online world. Cool. You got a couple of trends that you talked about. Maybe I'm introducing a risk profile to my customers and my community that's bigger than I imagined. Maybe I buy into this idea that businesses are being trusted less and less by people, especially millennials. Maybe I buy into this concept that off into the future there are going to be a group of people who make conscious decisions about choosing brands and products that match their values. Maybe you buy into that, but there's an ever-present pressure that all of us feel in all of our organizations, or many of us do. And that's that your CEO, your board of directors, your boss says, great, and just make more profit, be more efficient. So we thought about this problem. We thought about the sales objection to working on building better trust with our customers and with our community inside of Mozilla. And what we chose to do is take a look at one of the ways that we measure success, and measure that success in relationship to general business practices and trusted business practices. So here's what we did specifically. We took a look at one of the lists that we felt was most valid, that identified top 100 most trusted companies in the world. It's created by SurveyMonkey and Forbes. It's been operated for many years now. We took a look at that group, and while it's not perfect, this is not perfect math, we took a look at the public stock price of the companies that were on this list over the course of a few years. And then we compared that list to the S&P 500, which is widely recognized as one of the most effective indices that track the most effective and successful companies in the world. And what we expected to see, what we hoped to see, is that the businesses that sat on that 100 most trusted list, at a minimum, performed as well as. We hoped that they performed as well as the S&P 500. What we found in our research was actually pretty stark. The companies that sat on that top 100 most trusted list performed on average about 5% better than the S&P 500. And in fact, in some cases, low double digits. But you don't just have to take my word for it anymore. Over the course of the last couple of years, more and more organizations have been tracking the same basic concept. In fact, just at the end of last year, Trust Across America took a look at the S&P 500 versus the top 10 most trusted companies based on a series of different attributes. And what they found makes our data look massively conservative. 25 to 50% better performance in the public markets than the S&P 500, the most trusted companies. So these trends fitting together make a bit of an equation that we can all start to think about and talk about inside of our businesses. If we increase trust by reducing the risk of our customers' data, it's not just a good thing to do, it actually can have a relationship into better business performance. So you might be thinking, well, okay, great, interesting story, I think I kind of buy some of it, but what can I do? We're a pretty unique organization, and we have the benefit of being able to try to operate with practices that most other organizations can't. And part of our responsibility is to make sure that those business practices help us be successful as a business and are ethical and above board and build trust with our customers and our community. Over the course of the last several years, we've developed a set of practices. We call them the lean data practices. These lean data practices govern everything that we do, from our product builds to the way that our products collect information, to the way that our websites work, to the way that our marketing activity works. And I'm going to share them with you today. They're simple, but complex. The first lean data practice is very simply, unless you are going to provide something of greater or equal value back to your customers or your community, don't collect data from them. So let me say that one more time, because this is the absolute opposite way most of us have thought about working in our businesses. Unless you are confident that you can deliver equal or greater value than the data you're going to collect from your customers or from within your community, don't take that data. Let me give you a really simple example of a way that you can make a decision that relates to this practice. So we've got 350 plus million people that use our products each month, hundreds of millions that use them each day, and we operate in about 100 different countries around the world. Our marketing team is about 120 people big. We cannot be everywhere. Even with community members that support our work, we still cannot be everywhere. So when you think about operating a business at that scale, we have to think about how do we provide value in the areas that we can. And in return, we might ask for information. Super simple. When we started reworking the way that our marketing strategy was built, one of the first things we said is that we need to provide more and more direct, individually valuable information to the people whom use our products that are in our community. And a very simple way to do that is providing an email. And a very simple way to provide an email is to ask for an email address. It is incredibly common, even if you don't provide something as simple as a newsletter in a specific language or in a specific country, to still collect that information from anybody that's willing to give it to you, no matter what country they're in. A simple way to think about using Lean Data Practice 1 is to think about not asking even for an email unless you're positive you can deliver value in that country. It's a really simple example, but it's just a way to highlight when you think about delivering a value back to your customers within your community, you should always be thinking about, can I do something as the business with what I'm asking for? And if you can't, just don't do it. Number two, for the last decade or so, we've seen IT and marketing have a tighter and tighter relationship, and the promise of IT and marketing working together is that maybe marketing can take over IT or vice versa. The reality is that IT has a lot of specialized practices that are really important for all of us to understand and all of us to use. In particular, if we sit somewhere other than IT, we actually need to care about where our customers' data is being encrypted and if it's being encrypted in the first place. For those of you that lease software, do you know if your customer's data is being encrypted? Have you set up access control so that you know who specifically can get into that customer data? How many times have you been in a scenario where you've hired a contractor or a vendor or maybe somebody from your community and you've given them access to a laptop and that laptop has had a file on it, a CSV with a bunch of customer information, and they've left the laptop? It's everybody's responsibility in every department, not just IT, to make sure that we are very smart about how we take care of our customer data and who has access to it. My favorite of Lean Data Practices is the idea that is very simple but hard to execute on, and that's to speak to people like they're human beings. All of you use products. All of you probably have products that you use all the time, that you love, that you find impossible to not use. The average terms of service that we have to read through or hit accept on is around 12,000 words. It takes an average human being about 60 minutes to read 12,000 words. This is average. The perversity of what we do as an industry, especially technology, is expecting our customers and our community members to be this weird amalgam of a robot and a lawyer, where they've got the stamina to read through what we've written, and they've got the legal comprehension to understand what we've written. It's just not right. It's not fair. We should constantly be thinking about two things. One, can I speak to my customers in my community in a way that is easy to understand in their language, colloquially? And the second should be, we need to allow for our customers and our community to validate what we have said. So we happen to be an open source organization. We were kind of a Kickstarter of the free software movement back 15 plus years ago. So we've always operated this way. But one of the areas that we are very proud of is that if you're to choose to use a product like Firefox Focus on your mobile browser as a mobile browser, what you'll be able to see is if you want to read the privacy policy, you can read it on one hand. You don't have to scroll. Right? And if you don't buy what we've written, you can go into GitHub and you can take a look at whatever the source code is that we've developed. Trust but verify. And this obviously can extend out past what you do on a day-to-day basis inside your business into your marketing practices and your community practices. This is the last one that I'll leave you on. But basically, take those 3 data practices and apply them into the way that you market. Ask yourself the question, do you want to introduce a potential customer or somebody who you'd like to be in your community to your business, to your brand, in a way that doesn't represent all the things that you think are important? Right? If I don't know why I've gotten an ad and something's following me around the internet because of retargeting, maybe that's a questionable practice that I want to consider not using. As an organization, we get the privilege of being able to first think about our users. So we have changed our advertising practices to make sure that we don't do things like retargeting. We never buy, sell, or share any of our customer data. And importantly, we are very transparent about all of our marketing practices in addition to our data collection practices and our product. In fact, we'll put our money where our mouth is. About a year and a half ago, we pulled all of our dollars and activity off of Facebook because we are still uncomfortable with the way that they present all of their privacy controls for all of their users. So when you leave here today, just two important takeaways. Start talking about the importance of your customers' trust, your community's trust. Just having that conversation inside your business can start to create leverage. And that leverage can create opportunities for change. Take a look at the lean data practices. In traditional open source practices, we've made this available. It's public. More people can commit to it, ask questions about it, and provide feedback to it. You can find it here. You can also find it at GitHub. Thank you very much for the time.